The space station hung on the edge of the galaxy like a lonely star, small and fragile. It had once been bustling, alive with traders and travelers, but today it was empty. The news had spread faster than any alarm system ever could. The Dragon King is coming. No one knew exactly why he had chosen this station, but everyone knew the result. Cities burned in his path, fleets fell like leaves in a storm, and worlds whispered his name with fear. Vaelrith the Ember Crown. Ships abandoned ports, merchants packed goods and fled, and children hid beneath tables while their parents prayed. Everyone fled. Everyone except the baker. Oren Havek's bakery was small, tucked between two abandoned shops, its windows fogged with flour and the warm glow of ovens. The smell of fresh bread drifted down the empty hallways like a memory. Oren's hands kneaded dough, slow and steady as if the world outside did not exist. His hair was white, his back bent with age, and his eyes held quiet determination. He had heard the warnings. He had seen what dragons could do. He had lost family to fire and ash. Yet he continued baking. A shadow darkened the doorway and the room grew cold. Oren did not look up. The shadow stepped closer and heat radiated across the floor. He could feel it even before he saw it, the power of a dragon larger than any man could imagine. Vaelrith's claws scraped the tiles. Steam hissed from his wings. His scales shimmered like molten metal, gold and crimson in the dim light. He was fear made flesh, and every creature in the galaxy knew it. Oren finally raised his head, brushing flour from his hands. The dragon's eyes were huge, black pools that seemed to drink light. He smelled the man immediately. Fear, defiance, and something else, something unusual. Vaelrith stepped into the bakery, folding wings to fit, his claws careful not to destroy the counters or the ovens. The baker said nothing. He did not drop to the floor. He did not bow or tremble. Instead, he set a tray of warm rolls on the table. Fresh, he said simply, from this morning. Vaelrith stared. The air was thick with tension. Every instinct screamed for destruction, but curiosity slowed his claws. Who is this human that does not beg? The dragon's voice rumbled like distant thunder. Do you know who I am? I do, Oren said, his voice calm. You burn cities. You crush worlds. You are feared. He paused. But I still bake bread. Vaelrith's nostrils flared. The words were strange, defiant. And yet, they were not filled with anger or hatred. The dragon had expected screaming, running, pleading. Instead, he found quiet, ordinary persistence. He leaned closer, sniffing the bread. The scent was simple: wheat, salt, and a hint of honey. It reminded him of something long forgotten. Something small. Something human. Oren set a cup of warm milk beside the tray. Eat, he said. It's good for the cold nights. Vaelrith looked at the human. He could see the lines of age on his face, the hands worn with work, and a strange strength in his calm. The man did not see a king or a god. He saw someone who needed food. The dragon lowered his head and hesitated. No one dares offer me food. The thought made something stir inside him. A memory of simpler times when dragons were protectors, not rulers. He remembered the smell of the first fires he ever breathed, not to destroy but to cook, to warm, to protect his hatchlings. That memory felt distant and fragile, like smoke through his claws. Oren waited, silent but patient. He did not flinch when Vaelrith's tail brushed the walls. He did not scream when the heat from the dragon's scales made the air shimmer. He simply waited, kneading more dough slowly as if nothing could scare him. Vaelrith's claws touched the bread. He could crush it easily, tear the table apart, burn everything in the room, but he did not. He inhaled deeply, the smell of warm bread filling his senses. He could feel the warmth of the oven, the care in the hands that had made it, and for a moment he forgot the fear and anger that drove him across galaxies. Oren finally spoke again, his voice soft but firm. I have seen dragons burn my home. I have seen fire take everything I loved. But I still bake. Because someone must. Someone must keep life going even when the world is cruel. Vaelrith stared, unsure what to do. No human had ever spoken this way. Usually they begged. They cried. They swore loyalty for survival. Oren had done none of these. He offered warmth instead of fear. Bread instead of weapons. Words instead of screams. The dragon leaned back, unsure of what he felt. Confusion? Curiosity? Perhaps even something like respect. The heat in the room was still intense, the scales of Vaelrith glinting in the oven light, but the tension that should have been unbearable softened slightly. Oren reached for a napkin and held it out without hesitation. It was simple, white, and unassuming. Here, he said. Wipe your claws. You might burn something by accident. Veilrith's massive claw hovered over the napkin. His eyes narrowed. It was absurd. And yet, it was an offer. Not submission, not fear, but kindness. He had not expected kindness. He had not thought it existed in this corner of the galaxy anymore. The dragon slowly touched the napkin, careful not to tear it. For the first time in centuries he wondered, could a simple human, a frail and stubborn creature, truly understand something he had long forgotten, the value of life that was not measured by power or fire? Orin smiled faintly. Eat and then we can talk. Or sit. Or do nothing. That's fine too. Veilrith blinked. He did not blink often and he did not pause in judgment. He did not know what to do with this. And perhaps that was the most dangerous thing a human could do. Nothing extraordinary but nothing fearful. Simply be. The dragon exhaled, a plume of smoke curling toward the ceiling. He sat back on his haunches, folding wings that could crush the station, and watched the baker. The city outside was empty, the halls silent, but inside the small bakery there was warmth. Bread, flour, and quiet determination. And for the first time Veilrith did not feel like a conqueror. He felt something else. Something human. Something he had almost forgotten. The smell of warm bread filled the room. The heat of the ovens touched his scales. And in that small corner of the galaxy, a dragon king learned that fear was not the only way to be remembered. Veilrith's claw hovered over the small white napkin. The gesture was strange, almost comical for a creature of his size and power. He could crush it with a single squeeze, yet he hesitated. The human, Orin Havok, waited quietly, kneading another piece of dough as if nothing out of the ordinary were happening. The dragon's deep eyes studied him. Why does he not fear me? Veilrith wondered. Why does he not run, cry, or beg for mercy? It was unsettling. Dragons were used to fear. Fear made them respect it, made their commands absolute. But Orin seemed to carry nothing but calm and warmth. Finally, Veilrith touched the napkin with the tip of his claw, careful not to rip it. He lifted it, and Orin handed him a small piece of bread wrapped in another napkin. Eat, Orin said simply. You'll need strength if you plan to sit here thinking. Veilrith tilted his head, confused by the offer. The dragon had been feared across galaxies. No one had ever offered him food without trembling or plotting revenge. And yet here it was, bread, simple, warm, and soft. The smell made something inside him stir. Something long buried beneath centuries of conquest and fire. As he bit into the bread, Veilrith felt a strange sensation, calm, almost human. It was not about hunger, it was more than that. He remembered the earliest days of his life, when dragons were small, when fire was a tool to cook, not to destroy. The memory was faint but sharp enough to make his claw tremble. Orin leaned on the counter, wiping his hands on a towel. You look like you have a lot on your mind, he said. His voice was quiet, steady, and full of honesty. I do not care about who you are or what you have done. I care about what comes next. We all have something to build, something to keep going even after loss. Veilrith blinked, smoke curling from his nostrils. What does he mean by loss? He had taken everything from many worlds. How could a single human understand loss after seeing the destruction he caused? Yet, as he looked at the old man, he felt an unfamiliar weight pressing on him. Not guilt, not shame, but curiosity. Orin reached for another napkin, unfolded it, and held it out. Here, he said. I wrote something down. It may not seem like much, but it is the truth as I see it. The Dragon King studied the napkin. He could crush it. He could burn it to ash. But the human's hands trembled not with fear, but with hope. Veilrith realized that the words were not meant to challenge him, nor were they a plea for mercy. They were simply words meant to speak to anyone who could listen. He unrolled the napkin carefully. In simple letters, Orin had written, Fire can destroy but warmth can save. You are feared but you can be remembered differently. Choose what you leave behind. Veilrith's scales seemed to shimmer under the oven light. The words were so simple, yet they carried more weight than any weapon he had ever wielded. They reminded him of the dragons he once was, the guardians he could have been. He remembered the warmth of a young hatchling pressing against him, the joy of protecting life instead of burning it. The dragon exhaled slowly, smoke curling around his massive head. He did not respond immediately. Instead he sat back, folding wings carefully to avoid knocking over ovens or tables. The bakery, small and fragile, seemed to contain a power far greater than his own, the power of human persistence. Orin watched quietly, letting Veilrith absorb the words. I have lost people, dragons, and homes, he said softly. I have seen fire take everything I loved. But I still wake every day, bake bread, and offer what little warmth I have. That is all I can do. And that is enough. Veilrith stared at the old man. The concept was strange. Enough? Dragons measured life in fire, power, and fear. Yet here was a human measuring life in bread, words, and patience. And somehow it was stronger. The dragon reached a massive claw toward the table and picked up another napkin. He sniffed it, hesitant, then looked at Orin. "Why do you not hate me?" Veilrith asked. His voice was low, like distant thunder. Orin smiled faintly. "I could hate you. Many humans do. But hate burns the one who carries it first. I have seen enough fire. I do not need to add my own." He paused. "I offer warmth instead. It takes more courage to remain kind than to burn everything in anger." Veilrith considered this. No one had ever spoken like this to him. No one had dared to sit in his presence without trembling, without hiding, without plotting. And yet, here was a human who did not cower, who offered warmth, bread, and a simple napkin with words. The dragon's massive eyes softened. Something shifted in him, something he had long forgotten. For centuries he had measured himself by fear. By the cities that burned, the fleets destroyed, and the worlds conquered. But these words, this simple act of kindness, it felt heavier than all the treasures of the galaxy combined. Orin leaned forward slightly. "You can leave this place with fire in your heart or with warmth. You can continue to rule through fear or choose a different path. I cannot decide for you. But I can remind you there is another way." Veilrith's jaw moved as he considered it. He had never been reminded of anything but power, conquest, and destruction. But now, an old human, frail in appearance yet strong in spirit, had handed him a choice as easily as one might hand a napkin. The dragon exhaled again, smoke curling slowly toward the ceiling. He lowered his head, touching the napkin lightly with his claw. It was delicate, fragile, and yet it felt sacred. He could feel the intention behind the words, the courage it took to write them, the hope that someone like him could change. Orin simply smiled and went back to kneading dough. He did not expect a miracle. He did not demand one. He only offered what he could: warmth, bread, and the truth written on a small piece of cloth. Veilrith's massive heart, long hardened by fire and fear, beat differently. He did not speak. He did not move. He simply sat, listening to the quiet hum of the ovens, the soft smell of bread, and the small courage of a human who refused to bow. In that moment, the Dragon King realized something he had never known. Power could be measured not by fear but by patience, persistence, and the choice to be kind. And for the first time in centuries he wondered what it would be like to leave behind not just fire but warmth. The napkin rested between his claws, simple and unassuming. Yet it carried more meaning than any crown, any army, any victory ever had. It was a reminder that even the smallest act of kindness could reach the heart of a king, perhaps even the fiercest dragon in the universe. Veilrith lowered his massive head closer to Orin. He did not roar. He did not demand. He did not breathe fire. He simply looked, and for the first time he truly saw a human, and maybe, just maybe, something worth protecting. Veilrith sat quietly in the bakery, the small napkin clutched carefully in his massive claw. The heat from the ovens touched his scales, but it no longer felt like the power of destruction. It felt soft, almost comforting. The words Orin had written burned in his mind more than any fire ever could. Fire can destroy, but warmth can save. You are feared, but you can be remembered differently. Choose what you leave behind. For the first time in centuries, the Dragon King remembered who he had once been. He remembered the days before conquest, before fear shaped his name across the galaxies. He remembered his first flight, the thrill of wind beneath his wings, the laughter of hatchlings tumbling over each other as they learned to breathe fire. He remembered being a protector, not a ruler. The memory was fragile, like smoke in his claws, yet it touched him more than the roar of any defeated world. Orin noticed the change in the dragon. He continued working, folding dough and sprinkling flour with slow, careful hands. "You look like you are remembering something," he said softly, almost to himself. "It is good to remember even when it hurts." Veilrith exhaled smoke, a deep, low rumble that shook the small bakery. "It does hurt," he admitted. His voice was almost a whisper, low and careful. "I have done much that cannot be undone. I have burned cities, destroyed fleets, erased histories. I was feared, yes, but hated. And now, I remember what I once valued, what I could have been." Orin wiped his hands on a towel and looked up at the massive creature. "You cannot change the past," he said. "But you can choose what comes next. You can leave behind fire or leave behind warmth. Both are powerful. One destroys. One heals." Veilrith's claws tightened around the napkin. It felt delicate, fragile, yet it carried more weight than the crowns he had collected. more meaning than any treasure. Warmth, healing. The words echoed through his mind. Could a human, small and weak by comparison, teach a dragon king about power? Could the kindness of one man change a creature feared across galaxies? He looked at Orin, kneading another piece of dough, unafraid, unhurried. The human had lost everything. He had seen fire take his home, perhaps even loved ones, but he continued. He continued to create, to feed, to care. Veilrith realized that this was the true strength of humans. Not power, not fire, not fleets, but persistence. The ability to endure, to keep going, and to offer warmth in a cold world. The dragon closed his eyes for a moment. He remembered worlds he had conquered, and the emptiness they left behind. He remembered the fear in eyes of children and elders alike, the silence of streets where life had once thrived. And then he remembered something else. The moments when humans had surprised him, when small acts of courage had appeared in the shadows, even in the face of dragons. The contrast struck him like lightning. Fear could command obedience, but warmth could command loyalty, respect, and even love. Orin spoke again, quietly, as if reading the dragon's thoughts. I have seen fire take everything I loved. But I have also seen that life continues when we give it a chance. Bread, warmth, a kind word, these are small things, yes, but they are stronger than fire in the long run. Veilrith lowered his massive head closer to the table. He studied the baker, this small creature who dared to treat him as a being, not a weapon. Every instinct in his body told him to roar, to remind the galaxy why he was feared. Every instinct told him to leave, to burn the station and move on. And yet he did not. He could not. The human's calm persistence had reached something deep within him, something he had thought lost forever. For the first time he questioned his path. All his life he had believed that fear was the only way to hold power. He had believed that fire was the ultimate answer, that worlds and species existed to bow to dragons. But now, confronted with Orin's quiet courage, he wondered if he had been wrong. Perhaps strength was not in fear alone. Perhaps strength was in the ability to endure, to protect, and to show care even when it was risky, even when it seemed small. Veilrith exhaled slowly, smoke curling upward and mingling with the warm smell of bread. Memories returned in fragments. The laughter of hatchlings, the small joys of flying under twin suns, the moments when dragons had been guardians rather than conquerors. The contrast with his current life of fear and destruction was sharp. The truth burned him more than any fire he had unleashed. He had forgotten the meaning of his own power. Orin finally broke the silence. You are not too late, he said softly. You can choose warmth. You can protect instead of destroy. You can be remembered for hope, not fear. It will take courage, yes, but you have that courage in you. I can see it. Veilrith studied the human, really looked at him. The wrinkles on his face told stories of hardship. The hands, worn and scarred, told stories of labor and persistence. The calm in his eyes told stories of patience and courage. And Veilrith realized that the human's life, though fragile, carried a kind of power he had never understood. A quiet, enduring power that did not roar or burn, yet shaped hearts. The dragon reached forward, touching the napkin again. This time he held it differently, not as a tool but as a message he needed to remember. The words, simple and human, had pierced centuries of fire-hardened scales and stone-like pride. They reminded him that the weight of memory could be heavy, but it could also guide the future. Veilrith exhaled one last time, smoke curling gently toward the ceiling. I will try, he said. His voice, deep and resonant, carried more vulnerability than any roar he had ever made. I will try to remember warmth. To leave something behind that is not fear. Orin nodded quietly, returning to his dough. That is all anyone can ask, he said. Even a dragon king. For the first time in ages, Veilrith felt the weight of his scales, not as armor for war, but as the reminder of a life that could still change. Memory had been his burden, but now it was also his guide. He had destroyed, yes, but perhaps he could also build. Perhaps he could learn from a human, simple and small, who had survived fire and loss without losing hope. The bakery smelled of bread, warmth, and something else, possibility. Veilrith stared at the ovens, at the soft light flickering on the walls, and thought of the worlds he could protect, the lives he could save, and the kind of dragon king he might yet become. And for the first time, the dragon king realized that memory could be a friend, not just a weight. That fire was not the only measure of strength. That even a creature of scales and wings could learn from the courage of a small human. In the quiet warmth of the bakery, with the napkin in his claw and bread in his mouth, Veilrith began to imagine a future unlike any he had ever known. A future where dragons could protect rather than destroy, where fear was not power, and where one small human could teach even the mightiest king the value of endurance, kindness, and hope. Veilrith lowered his massive head closer to the table, still holding the napkin with the message Orin had written. The smell of warm bread filled the bakery, and the heat from the ovens brushed against his scales like a soft reminder of life beyond fear and fire. The Dragon King's claws rested carefully on the floor, not crushing the tiles, not demanding space, just sitting. For the first time in centuries he did nothing but sit. Outside the station was silent. The usual hum of ships had vanished. Traders had abandoned their stalls, travelers had fled in fear, and even automated security drones had shut down, sensing the presence of a being no machine could challenge. Yet inside the small bakery, life continued in its quiet, steady rhythm. Orin continued kneading dough, folding it with careful hands, sprinkling flour over the counter. He worked as if nothing extraordinary had happened, and yet everything had. The presence of the Dragon King should have caused chaos, yet here in this simple room nothing seemed to tremble. Veilrith studied the human carefully. "Why do you not fear me?" he asked, his voice low and rumbling. Orin paused, flour on his hands. He smiled faintly. "Fear is easy. It is the default. But it does not change anything. I have seen fire take everything I loved. I have seen friends and homes burn. I know fear. I also know that life continues when you offer warmth instead." The Dragon King exhaled smoke slowly, watching it curl toward the ceiling. "And you believe a human can teach a dragon about warmth?" he asked. His tone carried surprise, though it was carefully hidden behind centuries of pride. "I do not believe it," Orin replied. "I know it. One small act can ripple further than any fire. You see bread, flour, and a napkin. I see survival, courage, and hope. If you allow it, even you can leave something behind that is more than fear." Veilrith tilted his head. He had ruled by fear, yes, and it had been effective. Worlds bowed, fleets surrendered, and cities were silent beneath the shadow of his wings. But silence did not equal respect. Fear did not equal loyalty. And now, sitting in this small bakery, the Dragon King realized how empty all those victories had felt. Orin placed another tray of bread on the counter, the warm aroma filling the room. "It is your choice," he said simply. "You can sit, eat, and listen, or you can rise and continue the path you know. But sitting does not mean weakness. Sometimes it takes more strength to remain, to understand, to choose a different path than to conquer." Veilrith's eyes, dark and immense, studied the baker. The simplicity of the human's words struck him. He had grown used to challenges, to threats, to displays of power. Yet Orin's calm was more commanding than any army. It demanded attention not through fear but through persistence. Outside the bakery, other creatures of the station began to watch from afar. They had heard rumors of the Dragon King's arrival, of his fearsome nature, yet none expected this. They saw smoke curling from the bakery chimneys, a sign of warmth and life. And when they dared to peek inside, they saw him, Veilrith, the Ember Crown, the destroyer of worlds, sitting quietly while a human kneaded dough as if nothing mattered. The sight stunned them. Whispers spread. Traders returned slowly, cautious but curious. Children peeked from corners. Other humans and aliens alike froze in disbelief. The Dragon King, feared across the galaxy, had chosen to sit. He had chosen to listen. Veilrith felt the weight of their eyes but did not move. He did not roar. He did not demand respect. He simply sat. And in that stillness something shifted. Fear began to lose its power. Respect, curiosity, and perhaps even hope began to take its place. Orin glanced at the dragon again, speaking softly. "You do not need to be the king who burns cities. You can be the king who protects them. You can leave behind warmth instead of fire. It will take courage, yes, but it is worth it." Veilrith exhaled another plume of smoke. Memories came again, this time sharper and more personal. He remembered the dragon hatchlings he had once protected, their tiny scales glinting under starlight. He remembered the first sparks of fire he had ever breathed, used to cook food, not destroy. And he remembered the fear in the eyes of those he had conquered, and how it had never brought him satisfaction, only emptiness. The Dragon King reached a massive claw toward the counter, touching the bread gently. The warmth of it, the softness, reminded him of those distant memories, of the joy that once existed in life beyond fear. He realized he had been blinded by power and conquest, thinking that fear was the only measure of strength. And yet, here was a small human teaching him a lesson centuries too late. Orin continued to work, not pressing him, not pleading, simply living. He did not demand anything from Veilrith, and that in itself was remarkable. The dragon realized that sometimes the strongest acts were quiet ones. acts of endurance, patience, and care. Minutes passed, then hours. The Dragon King sat, listening, thinking, remembering. The bakery became a small haven, a place where power did not rule, where fear did not dominate. Vaelrith began to understand that his strength could be measured in ways he had never imagined. Strength could be the choice to protect rather than destroy, to listen rather than command, to sit rather than roar. Finally Vaelrith spoke, his voice low and steady. "I will try," he said. "I will try to leave behind warmth." His words echoed softly through the small room. The weight of centuries of conquest pressed upon him, yet he felt a strange lightness in his chest, as if a burden he had carried for too long was finally lifting. Oren smiled faintly, returning to knead the dough. "That is all anyone can ask," he said. "Even a dragon king." Outside, the people of the station slowly began to return. Ships docked quietly. Traders opened their stalls. Children peered curiously into the streets. And everywhere whispers spread. The Dragon King had not destroyed. The Dragon King had chosen to sit. He had chosen to listen. And in that choice, something impossible had begun. A small ripple of hope, spreading across a galaxy long dominated by fear. Vaelrith lowered his massive head, resting it near the table. The napkin still lay between his claws, simple and delicate. It carried a truth that he would remember forever, that even the most powerful being in the galaxy could learn from the smallest acts of courage and kindness. For the first time, the Dragon King felt the possibility of a future that was not built on fear. A future where he could protect, not destroy. Where he could be remembered not as a terror, but as a guardian. And in that quiet, warm bakery, Vaelrith the Ember Crown began to imagine what it meant to truly choose his path. The ovens hummed. Bread baked. And the Dragon King sat, listening, learning, and slowly, finally beginning to change. Vaelrith the Ember Crown had sat for hours, listening, remembering, and thinking. The bakery smelled of warm bread, honey, and the faint smoke of the ovens. Outside, the station slowly came back to life. Traders reopened their stalls, children peeked from corners, and aliens and humans alike watched in wonder as the Dragon King, feared across galaxies, had done something no one expected. He had listened, and he had not destroyed. Oren Havoc wiped his hands on a towel and placed a fresh tray of rolls on the counter. "You have done well today," he said softly. "Not with fire, not with strength, but with patience. With listening." Vaelrith lowered his massive head closer to the table. The napkin still rested between his claws, a small, simple piece of cloth that had changed the course of his life. He had reread the words countless times. Fire can destroy, but warmth can save. You are feared, but you can be remembered differently. Choose what you leave behind. He understood now that strength was not only in conquest, it was also in choice, in courage, and in the decision to protect rather than destroy. The Dragon King stretched, careful not to knock over the counters or ovens. His wings, once folded tightly in intimidation, flexed slowly as if learning the shape of restraint. The creatures of the station, hiding at first, slowly began to approach. Their eyes widened as they realized Vaelrith made no move to attack. He did not roar. He did not breathe fire. He simply sat, calm and watchful, observing the small human who had taught him something centuries of power had never shown him. Oren spoke again. "The station has been empty for too long. But warmth draws life back. People will come, trade will return, and maybe the galaxy will learn something too. It starts with one choice." Vaelrith exhaled, smoke curling slowly. He thought of all the worlds he had conquered, all the fear he had spread. And yet here, in this small bakery, he realized that true power was not in the cities that burned, but in the lives that were saved, in hope that could grow quietly and steadily. He could still be a king, yes, but he would be a different kind of king. One who chose protection, one who chose life over fear. Outside, the station streets began to fill with cautious life. Traders reopened their stalls. Children laughed quietly as they peeked from behind crates. Alien merchants, skeptical at first, began to set up again, sharing nods and cautious smiles. Word had spread across the docks. The Dragon King had not destroyed. He had listened. He had chosen warmth. Vaelrith observed all of this, feeling something unfamiliar: pride. Not pride in fear or conquest, but pride in making the right choice. For the first time he felt that he could leave something behind worth remembering, not terror, not fire, but care, protection, and guidance. He could shape the future not by fear but by trust and strength in action. Oren placed a small loaf of bread beside the Dragon King. "You will need strength for what comes next," he said with a gentle smile. "And this is just the beginning. One act of warmth can grow into many. One choice can ripple across worlds. Veilrith reached forward carefully and touched the bread with his claw. The warmth of it reminded him of all the memories he had cherished, of hatchlings he had once protected, of friends and allies he had made across the galaxies. He realized that life, even in its smallest forms, was more precious than power or fear. And he decided then and there that he would protect it. 4 days after, Veilrith did not leave the station immediately. He stayed with Orin, learning about life beyond fear. He helped repair sections of the station that had been damaged in past raids, protecting merchants as they rebuilt, guiding ships safely to port. He even allowed children to approach him, teaching them the careful control of fire, turning what was once a weapon into a tool for warmth and cooking. The galaxy began to change too. News spread that the Dragon King had chosen a new path, and worlds long conquered by fear began to hope. Traders, humans and aliens alike told stories of the bakery where an old human had taught a king about kindness. Across planets, whispers traveled. Even the fiercest can change. Veilrith preserved the napkin Orin had given him. He placed it in a small crystal case, not as a relic of conquest, but as a reminder of what mattered most: courage, persistence, and the choice to offer warmth instead of destruction. Every time he looked at it, he remembered that one small act could change even a creature feared across the galaxy. Orin continued to bake, simple and calm as he always had. But now the bakery was different. It became a place of meeting, of protection, of learning. Merchants shared their stories, children listened in wonder, and Veilrith often joined them, teaching not only control of fire but lessons in patience and kindness. And slowly the station became a symbol, a haven. A place where fear no longer ruled. Where warmth, courage and endurance guided lives. Veilrith had once been a destroyer. Now he was a guardian. And the galaxy began to see what humans had always known. Even the smallest act of kindness could ripple across worlds. One quiet evening, Veilrith watched the sun set beyond the station's windows. Orin handed him a piece of bread, warm and fragrant. "To new beginnings," the baker said. The Dragon King nodded, accepting the bread with careful claws. For the first time in his long life he did not feel the need to burn or conquer. Instead he felt peace, warmth, a sense of purpose that had nothing to do with fear. The station was alive, the streets filled, and the galaxy had begun to change. All because an old human baker had given him a simple napkin and a choice. Veilrith the Ember Crown, feared across galaxies, smiled, or as close to a smile as a dragon could manage. He had learned that fire could destroy, yes, but warmth could save. And that knowledge he knew could change everything. In the quiet bakery, with bread on the counter, warmth in the air, and the galaxy beginning to shift outside, Veilrith realized that even the fiercest being could have a heart softened by courage, persistence, and one small human simple act of kindness. And that was enough to change not just the king but the future of worlds.